What is up, everyone? Today we're going to be analyzing the World Championship finals between Giovanni and James, but it is not me, James Evans. But yeah, we are going to analyze this set, and I'm going to give some basically analysis on like what the players might have been thinking, as well as how I see it from my perspective watching these players play. However, yeah, we're going to have a very epic set to determine it, because both of them are fantastic players and yeah, running really cool teams where the core composition they've been using the entire format, right? Giovanni's been absolutely crushing it throughout Regulation G and Regulation I with the Koraidon Sun build in Regulation G, and then in Regulation I he picked up the Lunala and been running this exact team for the entire format, and it's literally top cut everything he went to. He top cut the regional championship he went to, I think it was Milwaukee, and then he ended up top cutting the North American International Championship, and then he ended up with a pretty strong performance top cutting the World Championship, right? And is in the finals. So we have the build that he's been running since day one of the format. The Life Orb Koraidon, really just a very offensive Pokemon that can take knockouts, really great into the Mollusk Calyx Shadow Riders and the non-timid / jolly Chien Pals, Koraidons, and the Miraidons he might have faced throughout the tournament. The Power Herb Terra Water Lunala with the Meteor Beam and the Trick Room option, especially paired with that Ursaluna. It's really threatening with that Trick Room mode. Ursaluna and Lunala just complement each other nicely. The Terra Ghost Ursaluna with just 3 attacks in the Flame Orb, of course, doing huge damage with its Gust boosted Facades and Headlong Rushes. Then you have the Focus Ash Fluttermane that gets a speed booster with the Photosynthesis in the Sun, is able to do a lot, put on a lot of pressure against the ghost types out there, and that Icy Wind for the speed control with the Koraidon is a very scary pairing. And you also have the Choice Scarf Chiyu with the access to the Sun with the Beads of Ruin lowering the special defense on the opponent's side. Yeah, that's a ton of damage right there, and it's able to outspeed a ton of the format. The Overheat will definitely get a knockout or do a ton of damage even to resistances. And then you got that Brute Bonnet, which makes it a bit more defensive here. That Redirection that has access to, as well as the Spore Pressure that it has for opponents to set up for like some really heavy damage. So that is Giovanni's team, and then we're going to analyze James Evans' team, talk a little bit about how like I see how the matchup goes, and then we'll get into the actual like battle. Then you have James Evans, who kind of built this team last minute but is in the finals of the Pokemon World Championship. But he's been using the duo that he's been using for quite a while, which is the Focus Ash Calyx Shadow Rider with the Encore, the Terra Ghost that allows it to play aggressively alongside the Koraidon. He was running Wheezing Calyx Shadow Rider Koraidon for most of the format before this. Was one win away from top cutting the North American International Championship. Got top 16, I believe, at the Milwaukee Regional Championship. And yeah, like he's had a very phenomenal success with this composition. Running the Clear Amulet Koraidon this time instead of the Billy Shield, and that prevents the Intimidate from affecting the Koraidon. He also has the Sun mode. He's been running Assault Vest Raging Bolt for pretty much the entire format. In that special attack booster, Raging Bolt, just an absolute tank, able to do a ton of damage thanks to the Photosynthesis. And yeah, it's just able to do a ton of damage. The Volt Switch, which is interesting, we don't commonly see as much, but allows for some really cool positioning that you can do with this team, especially with the support mons like the Incineroar and the Brute Bonnet. And he is running a Helping Hand Incineroar, which is awesome because you can go for like Helping Hand Thunderclap with that special attack boost, can be very devastating, get an early knockout that could be surprising. The Astral Barrage, of course, from the Calyx Shadow Rider, especially with the Terra Ghost, can be super threatening. And then if the Koraidon is flame charged up, you can go for a Helping Hand plus a really strong attack with Koraidon that outspeeds and really just threatens a KO. Then you got like support with the Brute Bonnet, running the Covert Cloak to prevent the fake out flinches. Spore Redirection, of course, does have some good rolls here. And the Landis Incarnate, which is an interesting take on these kinds of Sun teams, but is really able to threaten like a lot of the strong fire types in the format. The Miraidons out there, and yeah, just does a good amount of damage that's hard to switch into. So that is the team. I'd say overall with the matchup between James and Giovanni, like I'd probably say it favors a little bit more towards Gio's side, mainly because Gio has a bit more offense that he can take, and he has like quite a few Pokemon that just threaten James's side. The big one is going to be that Fluttermane, I assume, because Fluttermane for Calyx Shadow Rider and Koraidon is kind of a nightmare because it forces terrestrialization. But of course, You do have the focus sash with the Calyx Shadow, so you don't have to terrestrialize it immediately because you can survive one hit. And then with the Koraidon, you can go for the Terra Fire, but it is a threat to both restricted, and it's kind of a mon that James doesn't exactly have the best answers to because it just outspeeds most of his team, and especially under the sun. And then you also have to worry about the combo of the Life of Koraidon, where Icy Wind, Close Combat, Flare Blitz is super threatening as well. So something you have to really keep in mind. There's also like the Chiyu, which Heat Wave will do a ton of damage to this team, so you gotta be watching out because Heat Wave is super threatening as well. And you also have to worry about the Ursaluna potentially coming in, because if you don't bring like Brute Bonnet, it's really tough to handle the Ursaluna under Trick Room if you're James. So those are the options right there. But James does have some tools that he does have access to. He can play a bit more aggressive thanks to the Calyx Shatter having the focus sash. I think if you position the Koraidon correctly with the Terra Fire, you actually have a really good chance, especially with Incineroar Koraidon, because with the Terra Fire from the Koraidon, if you're able to set up the flame charges, you're able to outspeed. The Helping Hand Collision Course can maybe snag a KO onto the non-bulky Koraidon on Geo's side. So you do have a few different win cons, I think, if you're James, but you really have to make sure that Geo does not get as many knockouts, and you gotta position that Koraidon correctly, because otherwise it can be really tough and easy to snowball out of your favor. But let's watch the match, because it should be really interesting. All right, game 1 of finals, Incineroar Brute Bonnet versus Fluttermane and Chiyu. This is definitely an interesting lead, I think, if you're James. And yeah, so what would I say about this lead that we see with Incineroar Brute Bonnet? I kind of understand division. I think Brute Bonnet might be forced to have been brought because of the fact that otherwise, like, it's nice for the Sucker Punch priority into the Fluttermane, which is pretty solid. And also it's like your only mon that can take a attack from the Ursaluna under Trick Room. I don't know if Geo actually commits to Ursaluna, mainly because you have to bring Lunala in that case, and Lunala's a little bit weird into James's team overall, because it's only really there to set Trick Room, and that means you can only have like 2 of the big threats of like Bonnet, Chiyu, Fluttermane, and Koraidon, and it kind of gets awkward. So I think I definitely see Bonnet in this matchup. I would think it would have maybe been kept in the back, but yeah, this is kind of a weird lead, right? Because Fluttermane Chiyu is just threatening super heavy damage into Bonnet, so there's not really much that you can really do. I think James, you might have to terrestrialize because you probably don't have a switch in the back, but the problem is if you tear to Bonnet, it's going to be a lot harder to deal, I think, with the Fluttermane, because the Koraidon can't Terra Fire, which is a little bit tough. But I think you are kind of forced to in this position. At least maybe you could get like a fake out mind game and a Spore, but Geo also has the Terra Ghost option. I don't think you go for the Terra Ghost option here realistically. James can go for Parting Shot. You could go for Knockoff to break a Sash. You can pretty much get a free Terra Water Spore off, but of course there's also like that mind game of like the Terra is a bit obvious on the Bonnet, so does Geo double up the Bonnet with like a Dark Pulse Moonblast combo, which would knock out the Bonnet, I assume, with the Beats of Ruin. So there is not really like a one call that will guarantee like a setup for James, so he's kind of in the back foot and probably does have to go for a terrestrialization. The question is, how aggressive does he get the Spore off? Does Geo make aggressive play here? We see terrestrialization. This is from James's side, so that should be Terra Water on the Bonnet, which means if we went for Fake Out, there was no Terra Ghost on the Chiyu, so that does guarantee a safe Spore. But let's see if that'll be the case here. Does get the Fake Out right, so the Fake Out does go out of Chiyu. That's some nice chip damage for later, as we do see the Moonblast. This is Beats of Ruin. So much damage to that Bonnet, but the Spore goes out in the Chiyu, which actually makes this weird. Like, sure, you stop the Chiyu from getting hits off potentially, but that Fluttermane is not looking like fun. At least on the bright side, if you're James, like, you get a Spore off, you can maybe reposition with maybe like a Parting Shot, a Sucker Punch, maybe the Fluttermane here to threaten the Focus Sash. But I'd say having to use your terrestrialization early, and you're still kind of in an awkward spot where you have to reposition, which gives turns for Chiyu to potentially wake up, is a bit awkward. So I'd say that like overall Geo still probably has the advantage across the board here. It's just really awkward, I think, for James, because Geo also can just protect to stall out, but we're gonna see the Fluttermane retreat. I guess maybe reading the Sucker Punch angle and just trying to get more offense here, which is smart, because like that is a really good mon for Geo to keep around. So it goes into Bonnet instead. Really smart here. The Sucker Punch does come out into the target, which makes sense here. And yeah, we're going to see the Chi-Yu take its first turn of sleep, as we're going to see the knockoff come out into the Chi-Yu. So you do get rid of the Choice Scarf, which is nice here. But now the Bonnet pretty much gets a Spore off. James does not have Flare Blitz here, so he can't really threaten the Bonnet and doesn't have Taunt. So now Gio put himself in a really good spot. That switch is incredible because now you get a free Spore. None of these Pokemon have Protect. Something is going to sleep. No Goggles, no Grass types in the back because you terrestrialized the Bonnet. And now, yeah, this is very awkward. The Chi-Yu is also, like, even without the Choice Scarf, still has turns to wake up and is still pretty threatening across the board here. So yeah, like, Gio has a pretty good position. I don't know if he'll switch out to capitalize or if he'll just, you know, just wake up turn, say, hey, the Chi-Yu, if you wake up, you get like good damage. If you don't, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I have Pokemon in the back. Chi-Yu gonna take a second turn of sleep there, which makes sense. A Spore gonna go out in case the Chi-Yu did wake up. I assume it was going for the Dark Pulse in the Bonnet here. Does get a knockoff into the Bonnet to get rid of Citrus Berry. That also will probably put the Bonnet into range with like Collision Course after the Sun comes up, even through Photosynthesis, because they run Defense Booster in Bonnet, so that makes sense. But Incineroar Sleep now is just kind of ugly regardless, because now it's a Spore into the Bonnet slot and a Dark Pulse probably, and I assume Dark Pulse will easily KO the Bonnet, and you get a free Spore into Incineroar. So pretty much James probably goes down a Mon here, unless the Chi-Yu takes 3 turns of sleep. But even if you take 3 turns of sleep, it's still awkward. Oh, but we see the Bonnet reposition, which is interesting. I guess like Gio wants to goes into Corral instead, maybe just for Heatwave KO to Bonnet. I don't know, actually. I don't know my calcs there. Okay, interesting. Incineroar takes his first turn of sleep. Sucker Punch comes out into the Chi-Yu. It's not enough. And Heat Wave? No. 3 turns of sleep. Unfortunate for Gio. Although Koraidon's in a good position now. You can go for Dark Pulse and you can go for Close Combat. But, I mean, James can, of course, make an aggressive play if he wants to. He could switch out into a Shadow Rider. I don't know if, like, Gio wants to Heat Wave and he knows the KO's the Bonnet because he knows the calcs better than I do. If Heat Wave KOs, he can pressure the Shadow Rider even on the switch, so that's not bad. Sucker Punch won't KO the Chi-Yu. So yeah, there's also a lot of things you could probably do here. You could Heat Wave Flame Charge if you want into the Bonnet to set up for the Shadow Rider in the back, which wouldn't be bad. So it's a tricky spot again for James because he's playing defensive. In fact, both of these players are already kind of they've already used almost half of their your time, which isn't exactly great for them. Yeah. Incineroar wakes up to get a helping hand for Sucker Punch. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. If you get rid of Chi-Yu, at least you don't get double knocked out here, and Sucker Punch going to come out, and Chi-Yu does take the knockout. So Chi-Yu, unfortunately, not able to do much. What does the Rhydon do, though? Goes for the Flame Charge, Red the Calyx Shadow Rider potentially, or if like if the Incineroar stayed in, maybe just hope that it was going to stay asleep. But I mean, it's still not a bad position for Gio. I don't know if you can go Fluttermane here because I don't think Fluttermane knocks out. Yeah, you go Bonnet here. You don't want to risk your Focus Sash either. So James actually got a pretty good turn off that because the Sucker Punch Helping Hand was the only way you can knock out the Chi in that position without relying on a crit. And now that's 1 Mon down. So you're up a Mon. Gio's been playing this a bit very defensively, but now he does have the upper foot, right? The Koraidon is now fast. You can threaten Close Combat, and you can threaten the Spore here if you're the Bonnet. So yeah, there's like quite a bit. I don't know who you Close Combat, because if you Close Combat the Incineroar, the Bonnet, it could come down to speeds. I don't think we ever confirmed the speeds because I think James went for Sucker Punch every time. So yeah, this could be a bit strange depending on the Bonnet speed tiers. Like, you could get a Spore off into Koraidon, or you might be able to Spore before the Bonnet on their side moves, so you might be forced to Close Combat the Bonnet. Bonnet going to retreat as this Calyx Shadow Rider to absorb potential Close Combat because you're hard reading. Yeah, Calyx comes in, that makes sense. I think if you're Gio, you probably just Close Combat Spore though, the Bonnet slot with a double up, because it kind of covers the switch. Let's see, the Close Combat does come out of Calyx Shadow Rider, and Parting Shot comes out. And then James is able to get a parting shot. But I mean, I think the big question is who gets spored here. I think if the Shadow Rider gets spored, you're still in a very bad spot if you're James, because I mean, he is stalling out the sun turns like really well here. Although I assume James's last Pokemon is Koraidon. If you have Koraidon, you can set up the sun for them in response if you go down Mons. So we'll see. I think you have to go Bonnet here because you can't afford to get Spore with the Koraidon yet. I guess if you expect the Spore to go into the Shadow Rider, you kind of have to go Koraidon because you need offensive pressure on the board, because you need to threaten like some heavy damage, and like Bonnet's not going to be that damage, right? So I think here you have to call where the Spore is going into. Hoping for the Spore on the instant slot. Let's see if that's correct or not. He does get it, so that's a really good turn for James, and now the Shadow Rider is actually in a good offensive position. But at the same time, like, we do know that Geo has access to Sucker Punch on the Brute Bonnet, and again, the Koraidon is fast. So there is a Sucker Punch Flare Blitz game that can happen because of the fact the Flame Charge boost happened. Although James does have the Mind Game here because you can switch out the Shadow Rider, you can protect the Shadow Rider. There's instant for either slot. So James's position is really well. He's making it really tricky for Geo, because right now, if you're Geo, you kind of have to call like what James is going to do, because you don't have a great mid ground. Also, if James plays very aggressive for some reason, decides, hey, I'm going to click go for Astral Barrage, very bad spot. So we see terrestrialization from the Koraidon, which is interesting. Did he just go for like Flame Charge plus Sucker here? Calyrex protects and Flame Charge. Bonnet takes his first turn of sleep. Goes for close combat, so you always get the KO on Bonnet if Incineroar switches for either slot, or you KO the Incineroar on the switch, so that makes sense. And then you probably went for Spore. I mean, I think this is fine too, because James already used his terrestrialization, right? Let's say he went for Astral Barrage, like Geo still got the KO on that slot, and then you got the Spore off in the Shadow Rider, so that makes sense because you're trying to clean up with endgame Fluttermane that still has a Sash available. Because you lost your Bonnet, you won't have that priority, and you lost terrestrialization, so that definitely makes sense to me, because the Bonnet can just spam like Rage Powder or Spore while the Fluttermane just takes the knockouts, right? So that makes a lot of sense to me. If James played aggressive there, I'm kind of curious if I mean, he would have got the KO with Astral. Calyrex would have been asleep, but yeah, now I still think Fluttermane is scary in the back, but Sun fades soon, which is something you have to watch out if you're Geo, because if the Sun fades, that means if James gets a Flame Charge, he can outspeed. Although, because now he's actually still kind of an okay spot, right? Because there's still a mind game between the Shadow Rider attack or switch to instant, and the Bonnet should be in range of Collision Course. Geo can of course switch out the Bonnet or the Koraidon if he wants to into Fluttermane. Yeah, it is a little bit risky because of the fact that, again, if Shadow Rider clicks Astral, so it's kind of like there's all these different layers where you kind of have to get this call right. There's so much between like what could happen here. Koraidon's going to switch out, that makes sense. You want to have the Sun available for the Fluttermane, so it goes into Fluttermane here. And what does the Bonnet do? Because if James calls this, he's in a really good spot. But he switches out the Calyrex Shadow Rider into the Instant, was trying to bait the Flare Blitz, which makes sense. But I think Geo, let's see. I guess if you Collision Course the Bonnet, you're still in a good position. But actually, no, it's still awkward. Sucker Punch. Ooh, okay. Read the Sucker Punch. Was trying to break the Sash. Collision Course does go out into the Bonnet and takes the KO, but this should be the final turn of Sun, so the Sun should reset, and now Fluttermane's gonna be fast. But I still think you're in trouble if you're James, because right now Moonblast plus Close Combat is way too threatening. Although I guess you do have the Mind Game because of how you could switch out the instant into the Shadow Rider and protect Koraidon, so it can still be a Mind Game there. Let's see if that's going to be the case. But yeah, I mean, you do have Fake Out, but that doesn't really help here, so nothing too easy, because the Koraidon is always threatened by the Moonblast, and the Incineroar is always threatened by the Close Combat. Like, James doesn't have terrestrialization. If you're Geo, like, the straightforward play is the Close Combat Moonblast, but there's always, again, protect the Koraidon, and the Calyx Shadow Rider switching in for James, because then he'll have a Focus Sash Calyx Shadow Rider that can spam Astral Barrage, while the Koraidon can get an opportunity to get an attack off, which is pretty big. So it's not super straightforward. This is still a read heavy turn, so let's see what they can do here, because it's a tricky spot. Again, this is kind of thing about the terrestrialization on the bonnet, which he was kind of forced into. Because of that terrestrialization, it's really awkward to position against this Flutter Mane. So Gio's still kind of in the driver's spot. Will make the play into Calyrex, which makes sense. Did Gio call that? Did he just flame charge again, or did he do something else? Doesn't get the call. Right, for James, went straight for the Moonblast here. Was this a flame charge, or was this a close combat though? It's a flame charge, so Gio gets him really hard here with the flame charge. That should secure the game, because now the Shadow Rider down to Sash. You have a pretty safe win condition if you're Gio. You go for a Moonblast or Shadow Ball into the Calyx Shadow Rider, then you close combat the Incineroar that's coming in. So yeah, really well played to both players actually. It looked like that Gio had some potential commanding spots. He could have just taken maybe could have just kept going for Spores with the Bonnet, decided to get more offensive initiative with the Koraidon. But James was able to play a really good defensive game for the most part here. And again, it was like the call at the end. The call at the end basically sealed it. If James, for instance, had either went for a Protector Koraidon, maybe went for a knockoff instead, it could have been a completely different game, right? But it's not easy said. And even then, like, it's still a bit tricky, because like, what does Instant do in that position, right? Like, Parting Shot doesn't really change any of the calcs here, and knockoff doesn't change any of the calcs. As James gonna try to hope for like one final prey that like Gio messes up and doubles up the Calyx Shadow Rider, and probably went for like a knockoff into the Koraidon. But if you're Gio, you just have a guaranteed secure win here of just going for the close combat and the attack here into the Shadow Rider. So yeah, really solid game one. I think that's kind of thing about playing defensive with the Brute Bonnet here, is you were still in not the greatest spot. I mean, granted, James had to get a lot of calls right, and he was getting most of them right, but at the end of the day, Gio had the more offensive pressure and was able to take advantage of it, and is now up a game. So really well played to both, and we'll move on to game two. But what I say, like, you could really do, I think if you're James, like, I don't think I would have done Incineroar Bonnet. Obviously, he had his testing and he understands the team more than me. I think like if I was doing Incineroar Bonnet, it would probably be a game 2 lead, at least for personally, like, because I just think it's super passive, as you saw, and like James wasn't able to get like capitalization on, like, you know, this immediate sleep. I mean, he got rid of Chiyu, but like, otherwise, Gio could have probably put him in a tougher spot with like the Brute Bonnet with the Spore Ringer, as like, again, James didn't have really any good switch into Spore, and like had a trouble of knocking out the Bonnet himself without the Koraidon. So kind of curious if there's like some lines of like, you don't want terrestrialization happening on the Bonnet, because if the Bonnet terrestrializes, it's still hard for James to get rid of. So I'm kind of curious if you're hoping that like you force the Bonnet to stay around with the grass typing instead of the water typing, because it's still annoying. But yeah, I just feel that the Bonnet is a bit passive, but that's what I would say. I think Koraidon plus Incin would be pretty solid here if we're going to see the same lead. But I think it's still going to come down to like a turn 1 call, because James doesn't have the best ways of dealing with like Flutter Chiyu combos, especially with like a hard aggressive play turn 1. Like if you read the Terrifier and Gio just spams Dark Pulse Shadow Ball, it's like pretty bad, especially if like there's a Terra Ghost angle. Like, but the Terra Ghost angle can still screw over the Bonnet, because the Dark Pulse into Shadow Ball would still like threaten the KO into Bonnet, or Dark Pulse plus Moonblast would threaten the KO into Bonnet. So I don't think there's like an easy path regardless. Like that combo seems like really rough for James, and I guess like maybe you could go Shadow Rider lead. If you go Shadow Rider lead, like that might actually be better. Like realistically, just use Shadow Rider to try to brute force maybe the Flutter Mane immediately, because that Flutter Mane's a problem, right? You could like lead maybe Flutter Mane like Calyx Shadow Rider plus Bonnet, for example, and go for Sucker Punch Astral Barrage threat. So That is a possibility. That is definitely an option that James does have access to, and an adjustment. I just think it might be a bit too passive running Bonnet plus Instant, but we'll see. He definitely had more experience with, again, the matchup than I do. So that's how I would think I would approach the matchup, at least on paper, like initially. Like, those are my thoughts. But we'll see what happens here. Again, both of these players are better than me because they did make it to the finals. So kind of curious to see what goes on for game 2. And does Gio make an adjustment? He could go with the Ursalune mode if he really wants to, but I don't think he needs to. I think the Sun mode is just powerful enough. Does leave with the same Flutter Chiyu, and we are going to see Bonnet plus Instant again. So I don't know, this is going to be pretty passive here. There is also a trade you can take with the Flutter Mane too, I guess, with this angle as well. You could go for like Sucker Punch knockoff into the Flutter, hope you get rid of it, and then like that's one of the biggest threats to your board, right? So that could be something you take, especially with like the Dark Pulse would go out into the Bonnet first if like Gio makes a Dark Pulse play of reading the Terra Water. So you could go for like Sucker Punch knockoff, you take the Dark Pulse Moonblast into the Bonnet slot, and that's not a bad trade-off. Sucker Punch does come out from the slot, so that makes sense. Yeah, it is the Dark Pulse Moonblast, so super smart here from James. Moonblast going to come out into the Bonnet, but I think that's like the best trade you could have asked for if this is a knockoff. If this is a knockoff, that's incredible. Oh, goes for a knockoff and a Chew though, so the Flutter is still around, but I don't think this is that bad actually. Like if you're James, I actually don't mind this spot because the knockoff and the Chew, you could go into Calyx Shadow Rider. I'm pretty sure that Terra Ghosts, Helping Hand, Astral Barrage would knock out the Chew and the Flutter, and there's no response here, I think. Yeah, like I like that a lot because it's Stellar Terra Flutter Mane, so it's not like Terra Normal on this Flutter Mane from Geo's side, so you can't Terrasilize out of it. Goes into Calyx. Yeah, I really like the idea of Helping Hand, Terra Ghost, Astral Barrage. Like Geo's only defensive play that you can make here is maybe going into Bonnet for the Chew slot and switching into Bonnet, but the problem with that is I think Bonnet I don't know if Bonnet would take 2 of those Terra Ghost, Helping Hand, Astral Barrages, and then you're still in a rough spot regardless. So I think if you're James, you just let it rip immediately with that Helping Hand, Terra Ghost, Astral Barrage, unless you want to try to figure out position. But I think you want to take this knockout really bad. Like the only way you can knock out Chew here is with that Helping Hand, Terra Ghost, Astral Barrage. Unless Terra Ghost doesn't KO, unless Terra Ghost isn't necessary to KO the Chew, but I'm like pretty sure you needed a Bonnet or Flutter Mane going to retreat instead into Bonnet. I don't know, because the Beads of Ruin is going to make the Bonnets struggle a lot. Oh, James plays defensive here, which I'm not sure if I like here. Snarl comes out, I guess. I'm guessing this is parting. Yeah, it goes for parting into the Chew, which was guaranteed there, so you get Koraidon in. I don't know about this spot though, because now I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that, because I think I would prefer an offensive position for James. Like if you got the Astral KO and a Chew and you got that all that damage in a Bonnet, like Geo's only response really is going out into, well, you could go Flutter or Koraidon. You probably have to go for like a Sucker Punch angle, but it's like really weird. I think like it's still really awkward for Geo because the Sash is still on the Calyx Shadow Rider, so the Astral Barrage is super threatening, and you could try to use the Calyx Shadow as bait to set up the Koraidon for a Flame Charge angle, especially because he broke that Sash on the Flutter Mane. So I think I would have liked that angle a lot more. I think this defensive play kind of puts you on the back foot. I'm kind of curious on like what James's thoughts were on this state here, because maybe he was worried about like this board where like Bonnet sure goes low, but the Chew goes down, and maybe like Flutter Koraidon. But the thing is, you get a +1 on your Calyx Shadow for knocking out the Chew, and then Terra Ghost +1 Astral like easily KOs Flutter, and then I think Koraidon might even just go down to that next attack realistically, because there's no bulk Koraidon. So like the Calyx without speed, maybe was worried about endgame Flutter Koraidon potentially position, but I think it would have been really tough for Geo to get that position, especially if you just hard switch to Koraidon the next turn. But yeah, Now I think you're just not in a good spot if you're James. Like, this is okay, but it's not ideal, right? Because Geo still has terrestrialization. There's a sucker punch angle. You could get spored. Is he baiting the Terra Water coming out into the Shadow Rider? I mean, or into the Bonnet? Because you would probably live the Astral Barrage, I assume, with Collision Course. Well, I don't know if you would live Terra Ghost, Astral Barrage, and Collision Course, but the Chiyu would, because there's no helping hand on the board. I mean, it's just super weird. Because I don't think you could get a double knockout, and I think Geo can just get like a Spore or a Sucker Punch or something here, which would be pretty bad for James resource-wise. Alright, we're going to see Terrestrialization come out from the Koraidon, so I'm curious, this probably means you're going for Flame Charge here, or maybe even rip a Flare Blitz. Maybe you're going for Astral Barrage, Flame Charge into Chiyu, accepting that one of your Pokemon's going to sleep, and pray that Koraidon can run away with the game. I guess that's your hope here, right? Geo's going to make the Terra Water play, so probably lives the Astral Barrage plus Collision Course. That makes sense. Astral Barrage just beats a Ruin, so I think this could have KO'd with Collision Course. That would have been close. Maybe not, as a defense boost. And also, I think James is Jolly Koraidon. A Flame Charge going to come out into the Chiyu, so he did get the Chiyu, so he's like, okay, I'm going to accept that one of my Pokemon's go to sleep. I'm just going to pray that the other can clean up the end game. That makes sense. And if you're Sporing, you're not taking a knockout, so there's turns where I can maybe like get some wake up turns. Or get some opportunities to burn those sleep turns and wake up. All right. Are we going to see... What would you go out into? Probably Koraidon, right? Flutter Mane doesn't accomplish anything in this board state. Yeah, you probably go Koraidon here. But if you go Koraidon, you won't have to... Like, the sun was set up earlier by James. And if you're stalling out the sun turns... then endgame Flutter Mane's a lot weaker, so you got to be careful about that. But Koraidon is going to come out because you need the offensive pressure into the Koraidon. James does have an Incineroar angle he can go for. Geo also has a switch to Flutter that he could go for the Bonnet. There's also, I just don't know, Collision Course KOs the Bonnet with defense booster available, because I think it is Jolly Koraidon, because I've seen James's pace before, so I'm pretty sure that it doesn't. With the defense booster from Photosynthesis, so this is tough. This is really tough. I think for James, maybe you protect the Koraidon to burn a sleep turn, but even then, like, what do? You probably, like, you could also, like, if you play with the protect play, which you do give options for like a Flame Charge or maybe a switch here. A Calyx is going to be asleep. What did the Koraidon click? It clicked Close Combat into the Calyx. Yeah, that makes sense. Reading the instant. Goes for the Spore and a Koraidon in case Koraidon went on the offense. I think that makes a lot of sense, I think, for both. So I'm actually kind of curious if James won by switching the instant, going for Collision Course though, because even if there was a read there, like, well, actually no, because you're slept. I think it would come down to sleep turns because Koraidon would be healthy. You would get the Collision Course and knock out the Koraidon because it lowered his defenses. Oh no, you wouldn't win because you Flame Charge to get the knockout, so you're faster. Never mind. Yeah, no. This is still a really weird play. Looks like James is just gonna roll the dice here, go for the Collision Course into the Koraidon. This does come down to potential sleep here. He's asleep. Goes for the Flame Charge and the Calyx. Okay. And a Spore. Yeah, Spore is the Koraidon. So I think Geo actually has pretty much a dominant position now. I think if you're Geo, you could go for Close Combat into the Koraidon and you go for... I don't think you can Sucker Punch the Calyx. I think you have to Spore the Calyx, or you sleep, or you go for a Seed Bomb potentially. But yeah, I think you're in a really good spot if you're Geo. I'm pretty sure that you have this because Koraidon... It's not the bulkiest Koraidon for James, so I'm pretty sure that Close Combat just one-shots to Koraidon easily with Close Combat. Unless Incineroar switches, but if you switch in Incineroar, Incineroar goes down, which is pretty good for Geo, because then your Flutter Mane's in a good spot. I think, to win. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's easy per se here because James hasn't taken any sleep turns on the Koraidon. Close combat threatening a knockout. We see the first turn to sleep for the Koraidon. Calyx wakes up, goes for protect. Okay, but is that enough realistically? Geo does go for the close combat. Oh wow, that actually did live. Okay, wait, hold on. Because of that live, that makes it interesting. Spore goes out into the Calyrex. Now here's the awkward part for Geo. The Incineroar is healthy on James's side, right? So we know that James has full health, basically Incineroar in the back, or like a really healthy Incineroar at this point. So the only way that Geo can really knock out the Incin is by going for close combat. But the thing is, you only get one hit off if the Incineroar ever switches in. So you might be thinking, oh, this is pretty simple. There's a Sucker Punch strat and maybe like a Flare Blitz angle, or you close combat the Koraidon and you go for a Sucker Punch in the Calyx, right? It's not as easy as that because there is the angle. Actually, because the Incineroar can always switch in. So if you read like if Geo wants to Flare Blitz the Calyx, there could be a potential switch into Incineroar for it. So I do think that Geo probably has this locked up if you close combat to Koraidon again and you just throw off a Sucker, or you throw off a Spore. I think you want a Sucker first and then Spore. Yeah, I think that would be the call. I think that's what you want to do, yeah. Because you would want to go for, you want to close combat to Koraidon, take the knockout, and then you want a Sucker. I mean, like, James does have some outs, like Calyx can switch out to Incin and the Koraidon wakes up and protects. Like, I think that's what he's going for. So I think that's his only out, so that makes sense. Also, like, if there is a Incineroar bait, and or if like the Flare Blitz comes out, you do baits that. So I think that's a pretty smart or that's a really smart instant switch. The only problem is the Bonnie gets the Citrus Berry, so it easily lives the Astro, but the wake up is huge here for James. Gets the protect off. That's really big. Goes for Sucker Punch. We don't know into who. They went for close combat. Okay. So both of the Koraidons are Flame Charger +1, so Geo has the faster Koraidon. This is not easy for Geo now. Like, James has gotten the sleep turns that he needed, and now he's in a good spot because now you threaten the fake out pressure. And again, the Koraidon has to guess everything correct, because if this Koraidon doesn't guess everything correct and it goes down, it's such a rough spot actually if you're Geo, because again, the Incineroar is basically healthy and it's really hard to beat this Incineroar at this point. I think you could probably be with Flutter Mane, but I don't know 2 Moonblast would KO the Incineroar. But you also have to worry because of the fact that there's no sun, it looks like, so won't have the speed booster, and Calyx isn't slept. Koraidon protects here as Fake Out goes into Bonnet, and Flame Charge goes out into Koraidon. Okay, so I mean, there's a Sucker Punch angle and there's a close combat angle. I think if you... The thing is, there's a lot of mind games involved here. And I mean a lot of mind games involved. The reason is you could Sucker Punch the Koraidon again and close combat the Incineroar. There's a Shadow Rider that could reposition if you call like either of the Sucker Punches, so it can be awkward. I don't even know if you want to switch out the Koraidon if you're James, because you don't want to give the Flutter Mane the access to the sun, because if you give Flutter Mane access to the sun with the speed booster, that could be threatening. And Geo might even want to get the sun up himself, so there's a world where he switches out the Koraidon into Flutter and Sucker Punches the Koraidon, which is definitely possible. But let's see. Yeah, he does make the switch because he wants the sun booster. Did James go for knockoff here into the Flutter? He might have been willing to risk the Incineroar, because that if the Koraidon did close combat for the knockout, it's a Flutter without the sun booster, which would be big. Yeah, he did go for the knockoff, so really good play by James. And yeah, that was really good. That was really good. Even if Spore comes out into Incin, the game's looking really rough. Yeah, I mean, Spore to Incin. Well, I guess like you also have Shadow Rider Sash is broken, so it's not over. Like, Geo's still probably an okay spot because Koraidon comes in. But the thing is, Koraidon doesn't have enough turns to get the KOs here, right? Because the Incineroar of Rocky Helmet means this Koraidon literally has one attack available. It will live 2 turns of Life Orb, but it won't live 1 attack if it hits the Incineroar. So, Bonnet cannot beat the Incineroar in the end game. So, James just has to find a way to knock out this Koraidon with Incineroar healthy, and he wins. And even if he doesn't do that, if like Geo ever just close combats the instant, he probably just loses to Shadow Rider in the end. So James goes for a double protect. That makes sense. This is knockoff as the Rage Powder comes out. That makes sense. This is Flame Charge into the Koraidon. Yep. Is this Parting Shot or is this knockoff? Both make sense here. I still think you lose no matter what, though. Yeah, you lose no matter what if you're Geo. Instant. Oh yeah, Instant is still asleep, so it doesn't really change anything there. So yeah, gain the Flame Charge. Calx comes in. But you have a guaranteed win, I think, if you're James, because like what Geo can do, you can close combat the Instant. If you close combat the Instant, the Calix is just going to encore the Bonnet into either Rage Powder, which was the previous move, or Sucker Punch if it goes for it. And then if you encore into Sucker Punch, you just stall out its power points. And then you can go for like Astral Single Target. Well, actually, no, because... No, Astral Single Target might KO the Bonnet because it's Terra Water. I think it would come down to that, but I think that would be your best out. You could also protect knockoff if you're James, which is also fair. I think it could come down to Spore Sleep turns or Geo decides to go for the Spore though. So I don't think there's like... I still think it's probably positive for James just because you have that Encore threat. Because Calyx can only get 1 knockout. Like it's on its final turn of Life Orb. And if you KO the Calyx, you just can't beat the Incineroar. Like Bonnet will always lose to the Incineroar at this point. And Timer's not an option because look at the Your Times. Like it won't help. A Koraidon I'm going to protect, but I think that guarantees the loss unless Geo went for Sucker. But yeah, like Encore into Rage Powder, that should be set here. Because now that the Bond is locked into Rage Powder, you just always Astral Barrage and knock off. Because now, like, Koraidon could go for a double protect, but the Bonnet's locked into Rage Powder for 2 more turns thanks to the Encore, which means you 2-shot the Bonnet with the spread Astral Barrage. And again, there's not much you can do. Because if the Koraidon takes the knockout on Calyx, the Bonnet still loses to Instant. If you take the knockout to Incineroar, the Calyx beats the Bonnet locked into Rage Powder. So I think like Geo was just hoping for a mistake on James's part at this point because he realized it was super rough, but James didn't fall for it. So really well positioned game from James actually. Like I remember watching this the first time and I didn't really do super big deep dive, so I thought like Geo actually had the lead, but no, James actually like played really well into repositioning everything that he needed to in order to have himself a chance here. And like yeah, the close combat's going to go in Incineroar. It takes a knockout in Incineroar, but at this point, it's just like looking super rough now, right? And yeah, like was just always going to be down to that situation regardless. So Incineroar goes down. And Koraidon faints. As Astral Barrage, I think if Geo maybe locked into Sucker Punch, was there an angle he could win? As Astral Barrage KOs the Bonnet, yep. If Geo goes for Sucker Punch instead of Rage Powder, then Koraidon can close combat the Incineroar the next turn like it did here. But James, I mean, James just stalls out the Sucker Punch power points, right? Like I'm pretty sure like he had enough ways to stall out the Sucker Punch power points. I don't know what the exact number of Sucker Punch power points was, but I think if you're able to stall it out, you do win the game there. So a really impressive play by James to get back in the game. Let's see if there's an adjustment game 3 though, because I don't know if you really want to lead that again, but we'll see, as we are actually straight into game 3 and it's the same leads again. Okay. Is Gio gonna let what happened with the sucker punch? You could actually go into Bonnet here for Gio. I think it's super safe. For either one. Yeah, you could go into Bonnet for either play. Like you could protect the flutter. You could play aggressive too. Like if you want to play aggressive too, that's also another option. But we'll see. As it's mind games with the sucker punch and a bunch of others. We're gonna see the Chew retreat into the Bonnet. Yep, and protect. So that was also another option that Gio did have access to, because now if James went for the Terra Water plan, he would get threatened by the Spore, and yeah, now he's in a good spot because like Fake Out goes out and Sucker Punch, but there's not really much that happened here. So now it's kind of a weird mind game again, because there's like you don't want the Flutter Mane to go down to Sucker Punch knockoff. You could go into Chiyu for Geo and you could just draw off a Spore into Incineroar, or you could go on the aggressive and just go for the Moonblast here, because Moonblast, I don't think Moonblast KOs the Bonnet directly. You could go Chiyu for the Bonnet slot and Moonblast here, the Bonnet, because that would KO. You could go for Stellar Terra if you had access to the Moonblast KOing the Bonnet and then getting the Spore off into the Incin, which also would be big. But yeah, like James is still kind of in a back foot. I think ideally he wants to try to figure out the KO on a Flutter Mane, but looks like we are going to see Terrassization come out, and I think this is the Flutter. Yeah, this is the Flutter. So this is Moonblast easily here. Now, if James goes for Sucker Punch plus knockoff, he KOs the Flutter Mane, which is huge for him, because that gets rid of Terra too. It's just Moonblast, and yeah, you need the Terrassization to KO the Bonnet, and the Moonblast goes off. No Sucker Punch. So I think James, I do remember talking to him about this, and he did say he was like hard reading the Chiyu switch at dinner after World's Finals, because I do remember talking to both. So yeah, hard red unfortunately didn't work out. Gio made more of the aggressive play, and it just works out really well for him as he gets the Spore off into the Incin. And now it's pretty much like, okay, James is in a very bad spot. If he broke the Sash on the Flutter, he was in a good spot. He knocked out the Bonnet because he wanted to put in range of Collision Course, but now he's just in not a great spot at all. Rhydon comes in, and I think if you're Gio, you have a few different options. You can go to Chiyu if you want. You could just go for a Spore attempt into the Koraidon, because if it doesn't flare blitz or Collision Course, the Koraidon just goes to sleep here. So that could be big. Of course, like James could protect, and like the sleep turns could be a thing, but right now it's looking really rough for him to be able to capitalize, because again, the Flutter Mane has access to just be able to draw some really heavy damage across the board. So really rough. But sometimes when you're in a bad position, you kind of have to gamble. You have to get those turns right. There are a bunch of mind games here, and unfortunately, like James did get the turn 2 wrong here. Gio got that call absolutely right and was just able to really capitalize. It's not over for both though, but it's looking really rough, I think, for James to be able to win. Granted, he does that Terrassization now. Incin plus Koraidon on the field with Terrafire does have some openings. I just feel like it's gonna be pretty tough to see here, because Flame Charge into Flutter Mane means that you could be getting spored here, so you can't really set up a Flame Charge situation. Goes for a Moonblast for Gio just to get chipped on the Incin in case there's a Protect. Collision Course going to come out. Like, that's even fine as well for Gio as well. You do see the Bonnet KO'd, but now Koraidon comes in. Chiyu comes in. Either of these Pokemon come in and threaten a lot regardless. So let's see. I think realistically Gio has pretty good angles with either one. So I think the only thing is though, if you go Koraidon, you could be risking Helping Hand Collision Course. Like if the Incin wakes up, gets Helping Hand Collision Course, you lose the Koraidon. It would be bad, but I still think Chiyu Flutter would probably win that end game. But yeah, we're going to see the Chiyu come in. That makes more sense because you had that Beats of Ruin. You threaten the KO into the Incineroar Moonblast. You could go for Dark Pulse. Even a Sun Boosted Heat Wave. I don't think it would KO the Incineroar, but you have to worry about Shadow Ball Heat Wave KOing the Koraidon. So yeah, like Gio's just putting on way more offensive pressure on the board. Like James is going to have to like you get a call, but even if you get a call, right, like Fluttermane having its sash is just so bad for him. Like it really is a terrible spot for him because of the sash available, which means that the Flutter is just always guaranteed to pretty much stick around this turn. And like the Fluttermane's still tough to deal with for the Shadow Rider in the back. So it's looking really rough. I mean, can you win this if you're James? Maybe if you hope a Heat Wave comes out and miss, or like some bad targets, like going for the Protect here. Shadow Ball comes out into the Koraidon, but was this a Dark Pulse or Heat Wave? He's probably hoping for a knockoff, maybe into the Chi-Yu to get the Scarf removed. Then he could maybe double up the Flutter. Heat Wave gonna come out. That did a lot less than I thought. For Beads of Ruin plus Heat Wave, that did a lot less than I thought, but okay. Didn't wake up, unfortunately, so now I think as long as Geo hits the Heat Waves here, he's in a good spot. I'm shocked the Heat Wave did that little, by the way. It's not -1. No, it's not -1. I'm shocked because that's in Sun, but... And James isn't Assault Vest on the instance rocking helmet. You get a Heat Wave plus a Shadow Ball here if you're Geo. I think at this point, do you cover for the misses? I don't think so. I think you play on the aggressive. Beads of Ruin, Shadow Ball with Stellar Terra coming out in a Koraidon. Yeah, so much damage. Is there a Heat Wave miss? Nope. Heat Wave double connects, double KOs. And now Geo pretty much has the game guaranteed lock, because if it's Shadow Rider back, all you have to do is go for Shadow Ball and you just attack realistically. Yeah, all you have to do is attack. You never want to switch out because the Fluttermane, again, having its sash available means that James cannot win, because all you have to do is Shadow Ball and Heat Wave. Yeah, no. If, let's say, how many Sun turns are there? The thing is, James can never knock out the Chi-Yu anyway, so it's over. Like, maybe if Chi-Yu... Like, there's no Astral Barrage crit that can knock out Chi-Yu. Like, Chi-Yu could miss every move here and still, like, Geo would win. All you have to do is just Shadow Ball with Fluttermane into the Calyx Shadow Rider, bring it down to its Focus Sash, and then, like, even if Chi-Yu misses every attack, like, the Fluttermane's faster, has a guaranteed hit off into Shadow Rider, and even if the Sun fades out, you have Koraidon back, so you just switch into Koraidon, and then you get the Sun up. So like, there's no world where James wins here. He's just gonna get knocked out to the Shadow Ball and the Heat Wave, and Geo is your world champion. Really well played set by all three. That was a good Worlds Finals. It did have to come down to calls. I mean, like, it was always going to come down to calls, especially in that matchup. Unfortunately, James just had a really rough turn two. Like, that turn two, like, he was really hoping that Geo might switch it up or play more defensive there, as he was playing a bit defensive the entire set. But like, Geo finally went on the offense, was able to take that Moonblast KO into the Brubane with the Stellar Terra, knocking that out. Just gave him so much momentum because he didn't lose his sash on the Fluttermane, and because of that, like, Geo was able to play super aggressive with the rest of his team and just like out pressure James's entire six, because there was nothing that James could do to really switch in, especially with taking the Spore. So the instant wasn't really happy, and yeah, like, across the board, thought it was well played from both players and was definitely worthy of a World Championship Finals. I hope I gave some in-depth explanation of like what the scenarios could have been depending on the players, what like moves, like options that they had access to, like what outs that they had that they were playing to. And yeah, I hope it was a good reaction video, and I hope if you did watch this and you watched this video afterward, hopefully you might have learned something that you didn't. But yeah, that was a great set, so awesome to see there. If you would like to check out more videos like this and you enjoy the reactions, be sure to leave a like down below, leave a comment down below. It really does help out, especially with this new channel. And if you want more VGC action, subscribe to this channel and the main channel that I have where I do VGC battles, so make sure you go check them out. And yeah, awesome performance, and I'm excited for 2026 Worlds. Should be a good one. But until next time, I'll catch y'all later.